All right, so today's lesson is on solving equations. This is a review. So I want to talk about the goal of solving equations. So remember, the goal whenever we solve an equation is to isolate the variable. We're trying to get the variable all by itself. We do that using undo or inverse operations. So let's look at our first example. I am trying to get the k all by itself, and I see that k is being divided by 12. So I ask myself, what is the inverse or the opposite or undo of divide by 12? And I know that the undo or the inverse of divide is to multiply. So I have to multiply both sides by 12, because remember, whatever you do on one side of an equation, you must do to the other. When I do that, I find out that k equals negative 84. Okay, let's look at our second example, moving a little bit faster. Trying to get r all by itself. R is being divided by 4, so the undo of divide is multiply. I am going to multiply both sides by 4. R equals negative 40. Remember that you can do a check for both of these. So I'm just going to show you the check really fast to refresh your memory. You take your solution, negative 84, and plug it into the original equation. Divided by 12 equals negative 7. Negative 84 divided by 12 does equal negative 7, so that checks out. Negative 40 divided by 4 must equal negative 10. Well, negative 40 divided by 4 is negative 10, so that checks out. Let's look at our next two examples. So example number 3, I see that I have an x. I'm trying to get the x all by itself. I have negative 8 times x, so the inverse operation of multiply is divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 8, because remember, whatever you do on one side, you must do to the other. So I end up with x equals, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. $18. So x equals negative 18. You can do the check on that. You would put negative 8 times negative 18, and you can do a check on your calculator. Make sure you get positive 144. So for example number 4, I see that I have to distribute. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 6x is 12x equals a negative 70. So this one is a multi-step equation. Remember, the goal is to isolate the variable, so I'm trying to get that x term all by itself. But the only way I can do that is to first use reverse order of operations. I have to use the undo. I have to get rid of this 2. The undo of a positive 2, or the inverse of positive 2, is negative 2. So now I have 12x equals, same signs, add and keep, negative 72. And then I can divide both sides by 12. And I find out that x equals negative 6. We are going to do the check on this one just because I want you to see how it works out. So for the check, I'm going to take negative 6 and plug that into my original expression or equation. 2 times the quantity 1 plus 6x equals negative 70. I'm going to distribute. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times, I'm not going to distribute. I'm going to plug in for my x variable. X equals negative 6. So I have 2 times 1 plus 6 times negative 6. 2 times 1 minus 36 equals a negative 70. 2 times negative 35 equals negative 70, and 2 times negative 35 is negative 70. So that checks out perfectly. All right, let's go do an example. All right, so example number 5. First, I'm going to draw my river, and then I see that I have some distributing that needs to happen here, and I'm going to have to do some combining of like terms. All right, so I have negative 6x, and then I take a negative 4 times x, which is negative 4x. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 equals negative 64. The first thing I'm going to do is combine like terms. A negative 6 and a negative 4 give me a negative 10x minus 4 equals negative 64. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Negative 10x equals negative 60. Divide both sides by negative 10. X equals 6. Number 6 is a unique example because I have distribution taking place 2 times on both sides of the equation. So I have to distribute on the left side and I have to distribute on the right. So I'm going to distribute first, and then I'll use the goal of trying to get all the variables on one side and all the constants on the other. Negative 2 times n is negative 2n. Negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. Negative 3 times n is negative 3n. And negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. I like my equations to have the variable on the left and the constants on the right. So I'm going to move the negative 3n to the left side and the positive 4n to the right. Now remember, the only way to do that is to use inverse operations. So I'm going to rewrite this, and we're going to talk about how to do that. So the opposite of negative 3n is positive 3n. So I have to add 3n to both sides. That leaves me with n plus 4 equals 9. And then I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And I find out that n equals 5. Our last example has distribution twice, and then combine like terms, and then solving. So there's a lot going on. This is definitely a multi-step equation. So notice that there's just a negative outside of the parenthesis. I'm going to turn that negative into a negative 1 so you can actually see that I'm multiplying each term by negative 1 in the first parenthesis and each term by negative 3 in the second parenthesis. So let's distribute first. Negative 1 times negative 6 equals a positive 6n. Negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive 3. Negative 3 times 1 is a negative 3. Negative 3 times a negative n is a positive 3n equals 2n plus 5n. Now I'm going to circle the items that I can combine. I can combine like terms here. I can combine like terms here. And I can combine like terms here. So when I combine like terms on the left, 6n plus 3n is 9n. Positive 3 minus 3 is 0. So I have 9n equals 2n plus 5n is 7n. When will, so let's keep going. I'm going to subtract 7n from both sides. So that leaves me with 2n equals 0. Divide both sides by 2. N equals 0. Let's do the check on this one because it's an interesting one. I think a lot of you would have stopped right here and maybe thought it was no solution. So I want to do a check here because remember, 0 is a number. So if I plug 0 in for all of these, I have negative, and then negative 6 times 0 minus 3 close my parenthesis, minus 3 times 1 minus 0 equals, and 2 times 0 is 0, and 5 times 0 is 0. So let's see, what is negative 6 times 0? Well, anything times 0 is 0. So I really just have a negative and then a negative 3 outside of the parenthesis. And then I have a negative 3. 1 minus 0 is 0. Dang it. I'm not sure why that's not erasing for me. So negative 3 times 0, sorry, 1 minus 0 is 1, equals 0. So I end up with a negative times a negative, which is a positive. So 3 minus 3 is in fact 0. All right, so your homework today, 10 questions. I have you doing the check on 3 of them. So your homework assignment is 10 questions. So 10 questions. You will need to check 3. All right? Good luck.